Thought I would provide you with a little bit of assistance on a couple of homework problems that might give some people a little bit of trouble. So hopefully you've tried these, and I hope that after you watch this, if you did have trouble, that you'll go back and do these problems again on your own and make sure that you understand how these work. So here's number 30. On number 30, what we're told is the transverse axis is vertical and it's 9 units. So I think we're eventually going to have to graph these anyway, but just leading up to the graph, let's just do a little rough sketch. I would always suggest that if it means getting these right, if you just draw a little rough sketch, I think it always helps to make sense, a little bit more sense out of the information that's provided. So by saying that the transverse axis is vertical, that means that we're going to have parabolas that open up and down, just like the y-axis is vertical. And if it's a total of 9 units, and we're told in the instructions given in the book that the center of this hyperbola is at the origin. So for a transverse axis that is 9 units, that means half of those 9 units, or 4.5, have to fall above the origin, and the other half will fall below. So this total length of the transverse axis is 9 units. And remember, the transverse axis indicates the distance between vertices, and vertices are actually where our graph will, our two curves, will cross, in this case the y-axis. Okay, so we have pretty much a rough sketch of our graph as it is. I just need to make sure I include the interior rectangle, which we will do in just a minute. The central rectangle, another word for interior rectangle, is 9 units by 4 units. Well, the 9 units obviously is this way, and the 4 units then have to be this way. So 4 units, 2 on either side of the origin. So now we're able to make our interior rectangle. All right. Okay, so what do we know? Well, we know that the distance from the center to a vertex is 4.5 units. So in other words, A is 4.5. We also know that the distance from the center to the edge to the right of the interior rectangle is 2 units. So that means B, it's another way of finding B. B is 2. All right. Since our parabola opens up and down, we know that y squared needs to come first in the equation. Okay. So now all it is, it's a matter of taking A and squaring it, because we need A squared here. And if you do 4.5 squared, that's 20.25. And then B squared is 4, and that equals 1. So the part that says write the equation for the hyperbola, well, there it is. And then we actually have to sketch the graph. And I was going to do that on the next slide, but you should be able to take care of that. Remember how we do these graphs using this interior rectangle as a box with which we draw asymptote lines. And so your graph should look something like this. So I won't take the time to graph it again on the next slide, but that should be your final answer there for number 30. All right, let's take a look at number 32. What are we told here? Well, in parentheses it says the distance from the center, which is the origin, of a hyperbola to a focus squared. Well, that's a pretty wordy way of saying C squared is 96. C is the distance from the center to a focus. So really, they just gave us what C squared is. All right, let's see what else we know. the endpoints of the transverse axis are negative the square root of 32 and positive square root of 32. All right, those fall on the x-axis, so my transverse axis is obviously horizontal. Here's the square root of 32, 0, negative square root of 32, 0. Okay, well, that distance from the center to a vertex, that's what this is. The endpoints of a transverse axis are the vertices. So rough sketch, we're going to have a hyperbola that does this. Crosses the square root of 32, which is, it's between 5 and 6, about 5.5. And then square root of 32 over here. And this distance between the vertices is the transverse axis. All right. Okay, so what do we know? Well, the distance from the center to a vertex is the square root of 32. So in other words, A, that is this distance, is the square root of 32. Well, what's A squared? A squared is just regular 32. All right, so now we just need to find B squared, and we'll have all we need to write this equation. So remember, C squared is A squared plus B squared, so 96 is equal to 32 plus B squared, so B squared is 64. Okay, so we're ready to write this equation, and based on my graph, crossing the x-axis with these two parabolas, so I need to lead with x squared. A squared is 32, B squared is 64, equals 1. All right, and I won't take the time, but again, you just need to sketch the graph. It should look something like this, but you need to go ahead and include that interior rectangle like I showed you in class today, so that you can do the complete graph. Now, they don't say anything about plotting foci, so don't worry about plotting foci on 31 or 30, 31, and 32. You just draw the graph without the foci, and that will be fine. So I hope that helps out with those two. I hope you now try it on your own and just see if you can do it without watching. See if you can come back to the same answer. That's how you get better at these problems. And if you have any other questions, just contact me.